The coffee was still warm in my hands when the email arrived. I remember that detail so clearly now, the steam curling up from my favorite blue mug, the one Sophia gave me for Mother's Day when she was 12. Her tiny handwritten note still, tucked inside the box, for the best mama in the world. I kept that note in my jewelry box, yellowed now with time, like so many other pieces of our story. Before we continue, join our growing family, subscribe now, and be part of the journey. Don't miss a single powerful story. Now, let's dive back in asterisk. It was 7:23 in the morning. 3 days before her wedding. The wedding I had been planning, dreaming about, and paying for since she got engaged to Matteo 8 months ago. The subject line was simple. Wedding update. I clicked it open with the same anticipation I'd felt opening every email from Sophia lately, updates about flowers, the venue, last-minute guest additions. That this wasn't about centerpieces or seating arrangements. Hi Mom, after talking with Matteo and his family, we've decided to keep the ceremony more intimate. We'll send you a live stream link so you can still be part of it. Thanks for understanding. Sophia. I read it 3 times. Then I set my coffee down with the kind of careful precision you use when your hands are shaking, and you don't want to admit it to yourself. The mug made a small click against the kitchen counter. The same counter where I'd taught her to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl, where we'd rolled out Christmas cookies every December until she turned 18 and decided she was too busy. Intimate. That the word sat in my chest like a stone. I knew what intimate meant. It meant his family was invited. His parents, his siblings, his cousins who barely knew her. It meant her college friends would be there, the ones she'd met just 4 years ago. But not me. Not the woman who had held her hand through every nightmare. Who had worked double shifts to pay for her college applications. Who had co-signed the loan for her car when she got her first job. I walked to the window above the sink, looking out at the garden I'd been tending for 23 years. The roses were blooming, deep red ones that Sophia used to say looked like lipstick kisses. I'd planted them the year she was born, thinking someday she might carry them in her wedding bouquet. I'd been wrong about a lot of things, it seemed. Let me tell you about the beginning. Sophia came into this world on a Tuesday morning in February. 3 weeks early and stubborn even then. Her father Lowe's had left when I was 6 months pregnant, deciding that fatherhood wasn't the adventure he'd signed up for. So it was just us, from that first cry in the delivery room to yesterday. Or so I thought. I was 19. 19 and terrified and so desperately in love with this tiny, perfect person who looked at me like I held the answers to everything. Maybe that's where I went wrong, believing I needed to have all the answers, to be everything for her. I remember the nights when she was colicky, walking the floors of our tiny apartment until my feet were numb. The pediatrician had said it would pass, but when you're alone in the dark with a screaming baby and $23 in your checking account, that ever feels very real. I would sing to her the same lullaby my mother had sung to me, until my voice was hoarse, and she finally fell asleep against my shoulder. Those were the nights I promised her everything. That she would never want for anything. That she would go to college, would see the world, would have choices I never had. That she would never feel alone the way I felt alone. I kept those promises. Every single one. The years blurred together in a haze of sacrifice that felt, at the time, like love. Maybe it was love. I'm still trying to figure out the difference. There were the ballet lessons when she was 7, even though I had to skip lunch for 2 weeks to afford them. Watching her tiny feet in pink slippers, her face serious with concentration, I felt rich. When she decided she didn't like ballet after just 3 months, I didn't complain. I signed her up for soccer instead. There were the science fair projects that became my science fair projects, because she had inherited my artistic eye, but not my patience for research. I would stay up until 2 a.m. cutting foam board and printing charts while she slept, telling myself I was teaching her excellence. Really, I was teaching her that someone else would always clean up her messes. When she was 14, she wanted to go on the school trip to Washington, D.C. It cost $400 I didn't have. I picked up extra shifts, cleaning offices downtown, working until my back ached and my hands were raw from industrial soap. But when she came home with photos of herself grinning in front of the Lincoln Memorial, it felt worth it. College applications were a nightmare. Of deadlines and essays and fees. So many fees. Application fees. Test prep fees. The cost of sending her SAT scores to 12 different schools, because she couldn't decide what she wanted. I refinanced the house, our tiny 2-bedroom house where she'd grown up, to pay for it all. The loan officer looked at my salary and shook his head, but I insisted. She's going to be a doctor, I told him. Or a lawyer, something important. She ended up majoring in communications. I think the moment I started losing her was when she got accepted to the state university 3 hours away. I had hoped she'd choose the community college here in town, where she could live at home and I could still take care of her. Selfish, maybe, but I'd never learned how to be anything but necessary. I need to experience independence, Mom. She Sadie, and I heard the echo of some advice she'd gotten from a guidance counselor or a friend's parent. Independence. As if the 18 years I'd spent ensuring she never had to want for anything had somehow held her back. So I helped her pack. I bought her the extra long twin sheets and the plastic storage containers and the coffee maker for her dorm room. I drove those 3 hours every other weekend freshman year, bringing homemade cookies and clean laundry and the kind of maternal fussing she was already starting to find embarrassing. By sophomore year, the visits became once a month. Junior year, maybe 4 times a semester. Senior year, she was too busy. I'm networking, Mum. Building my career. She'd changed her major twice, and still wasn't sure what she wanted to do, but she was networking. I nodded and sent money. For textbooks and sorority fees and spring break trips. Because that's what good mothers did. Good mothers supported their daughters' dreams, even when those dreams seemed to involve a lot of expensive restaurants and weekend trips to the beach. Graduation, she moved 4 hours away for an internship at a marketing firm. The internship was unpaid, so I sent money for rent and groceries. When the internship ended and she couldn't find a job right away, I sent more money. When she finally got hired but the salary was lower than she'd hoped, I helped with her car payment and health insurance. It's just until I get established, Mom. I promise I'll pay you back. I never asked her to pay me back. I never thought of it as a loan. I thought of it as love. She met Mateo at a coffee shop downtown. She called me that night, breathless with excitement. Mom, he's perfect. He's an engineer. He went to private school. His family has money. Real money. Not like us. Not like us. I felt that like a slap, though I don't think she meant it that way. Or maybe she did. It was getting harder to tell Mateo was nice enough, I suppose. Polite. He shook my hand when she brought him home for dinner and complimented my pot roast. He talked about his job at the consulting firm, his plans to buy a house in the suburbs, his family's country club membership. He spoke about these things like they were achievements, not accidents of birth. Sophia looked at him like he was her. Ticket to a different life. Maybe he was. The engagement happened on a weekend trip to Napa Valley, a trip I'd helped pay for, though she forgot to mention that detail when she called me, sobbing happy tears. The ring was beautiful, a 2-carat solitaire that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. Can you believe it, Mom? I'm going to be Mrs. Vargas. I could believe it. What I couldn't believe was how quickly she seemed to forget that she'd been Sofia Delgado for 23 years, and that name had meant something too. Wedding planning consumed her life. And by extension, mine. She would call 3 times a day with updates, questions, minor crises that felt major in the moment. Mom, the florist wants to charge extra for peonies, but peonies are my dream flower. What should I do? What she should do, I thought, was choose flowers that fit her budget. What I said was, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll cover the difference." The venue was more expensive than we'd planned. The dress cost twice what she'd originally said. The photographer wanted a bigger deposit. The band required overtime fees for the reception. Each expense felt small in isolation, but together they added up to more than I'd ever spent on anything in my life. I took out a personal loan. Then another one. I sold my mother's jewelry, the pieces I'd been saving for Sofia, actually to pay the caterer. I cashed in my tiny retirement account to cover the bar tab and the wedding cake. "You're the best, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words used to fill me with pride. By then, they were starting to feel like chains. The morning of the email, I sat in my kitchen and tried to remember the last time Sofia and I had talked about something other than the wedding. The last time she'd asked how I was doing, how work was going, if I was happy. I couldn't remember. I looked around my kitchen, really looked at it. The walls needed painting. The linoleum was cracked by the stove. The refrigerator made a humming sound that had been getting louder for months. I'd been putting off these repairs, telling myself they could wait until after the wedding, after I'd given my daughter the perfect day. Perfect for everyone but me. Apparently, I picked up my phone and scrolled through our recent text messages. They read like a to-do list. "Can you call the baker about the cake delivery time? Did you remember to pick up your mother of the bride dress? The wedding party wants to do photos at the park. Can you handle the permit?" When had I become her assistant instead of her mother? The live stream link arrived the next morning, along with another email, this one from the bank, reminding me that my loan payment was due in 5 days. $1,500 I didn't have, for a wedding I was no longer invited to attend. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to do. I could take out another loan, maybe put it on a credit card. I could call Sofia and ask if there had been some mistake. I could pretend the email had never arrived and show up at the church anyway, force my way into my daughter's wedding day. Instead, I walked inside and spoke to the loan officer. "I need to stop the payment on the wedding vendors," I said quietly. "All of them." He looked confused. "Is there a problem with the services?" "No," I said. "There's a problem with the wedding." My phone started ringing at 2 p.m. First the florist, then the caterer, then the band. Payment had been declined on all the final invoices. Was there some mistake? No mistake, I told them. I was cancelling my authorization for the charges. By 4 p.m, Sofia was calling. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. And again. Finally, I answered, "Mum, what is going on? The vendors are saying you cancelled everything. There has to be some mistake." Her voice was high with panic, the same tone she'd used as a child when she'd broken something and was hoping I'd fix it before anyone noticed. "There's no mistake," I said calmly. "I received your email about the wedding being more intimate. Since I'm not invited to attend, I assumed you had made other arrangements for payment as well." Silence. Long, heavy silence. "Mom, you know, it's not like that. You're still my mother. You're just not. It's complicated." "What's complicated about it, Sofia?" "Mateo's parents. They have certain expectations. They've been planning this wedding too, and they have ideas about how things should be. They've already paid for so much and they think it would be easier. Easier without a me. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder than it had to be. As if I was the one making it hard. As if 23 years of putting her first had somehow become an inconvenience. I'm not making anything hard, I said. I'm just not paying for a wedding I'm not invited to attend. But Mum, the wedding is in 2 days. We can't change everything now. Then I guess you should have thought of that before you uninvited me. I hung up. She called back immediately, but I didn't answer. She called 17 more times that evening. She sent texts that ranged from pleading to angry to desperate. She offered to pay me back somehow, someday. She promised it was just about the ceremony, that I'd be at the reception. She said Mateo's parents didn't really understand our family dynamic. What a clinical way to describe a mother who had given up everything for her daughter. I turned off my phone and ran a bath. I hadn't taken a bath in years, always too busy, too tired, too focused on whatever crisis Sophia was navigating. The water was hot and smelled like the lavender soap I'd bought myself for Christmas and never used. I slipped into the water and let myself cry. Not the silent, careful tears I perfected over the years, but deep, ugly sobs that came from a place I'd kept locked away for decades. I cried for the 19-year-old girl who thought love meant sacrifice. I cried for all the times I'd said yes when I should have said no. I cried for the wedding I'd dreamed of, where my daughter would look at me with gratitude instead of embarrassment. Mostly, I cried because I realized I didn't know who I was when I wasn't needed. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls and 42 text messages. I deleted them all without reading them and made myself breakfast, real breakfast, with eggs and bacon and toast, not the coffee and granola bar I usually grabbed on my way out the door. I called in sick to work. It wasn't a lie, exactly. I was. Sick of being taken for granted. Sick of being optional. Sick of living my life in service to someone who saw me as an inconvenience. Instead of going to the office, I went to the garden center. I bought new soil, packets of seeds, a small rosebush with buds that would bloom pink instead of red. I spent the morning planting, my hands deep in the earth, my mind quiet for the first time in months. Mrs. Chen from next door came over around lunchtime with a plate of homemade dumplings. You look peaceful today, Elena, she said. Elena, my name, not Sophia's mom, or the mother of the bride. Just Elena. I feel peaceful, I realized, and I meant it. We sat on my back porch and ate dumplings and talked about her grandson's graduation, her plans for summer travel, a book she'd just finished reading. Normal conversation between two women who existed independently of their children's needs and wants and expectations. When she left, I didn't feel lonely. I felt present, like I was inhabiting my own life for the first time in years. That afternoon, I drove to the thrift store and bought myself 3 new books and a ceramic vase glazed in deep blues and greens. On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store and bought ingredients for recipes I'd always wanted to try, but never had time for: fresh pasta, artisanal cheese, wine that cost more than $12. I was cooking dinner, really cooking, with music on and a glass of wine in my hand when someone knocked on my door. It was Sophia. Her eyes were red and her hair was messy, pulled back in the kind of ponytail she wore when she was overwhelmed. Mom, please, we need to talk. I let her in, but I didn't turn off the music or put down my wine glass. The wedding is tomorrow, she said, as if I might have forgotten. I know. Mateo's parents offered to cover the vendors, but some of them are saying it's too late to process new payments. The florist might not deliver. The caterer is talking about a limited menu. I stirred the pasta sauce and said nothing. Mom, I know you're hurt, but you have to understand. This isn't about you. This is about me starting my life with Mateo. You're right, I said finally. This isn't about me. It never has been, has it? What's that supposed to mean? I turned to face her, this woman who looked like the little girl. I'd rocked to sleep, but felt like a stranger. When was the last time you asked how I was doing, Sophia? Not what I could do for you, not what you needed from me, but how I was. She opened her mouth, then closed it. When was the last time we had a conversation about my life, my dreams, my interests? When was the last time you treated me like a person, instead of a bank account with a maternal instinct? That's not fair, isn't it? You have my phone number memorized, but do you know what my favorite movie is? You know exactly how much I have in my savings account. But do you know if I'm happy? You can call me at any hour of the day when you need something. But when's the last time you called just to hear my voice? She was crying now, but I felt surprisingly calm. I love you, Sophia. I have loved you since before you were born, and I will love you until the day I die. But I won't be taken for granted anymore. I won't pay for the privilege of being treated like I'm optional in your life. You're not optional, you're my mother. Yes, I am. And mothers deserve better than live stream links to their daughters. Weddings. She left without saying goodbye. I finished cooking dinner and ate it slowly, savoring each bite. Then I called my sister Carmen in Phoenix, my sister who'd been inviting me to visit for 3 years, while I made excuses about not being able to leave Sophia. Elena? Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I said, and realized it was true. I was wondering if that invitation to visit was still open. Of course. When were you thinking? Next week. I have some vacation days I've never used. We talked for an hour about flight times and sightseeing plans, and the restaurant she wanted to take me to. When we hung up, I felt lighter than I had. In years, I didn't watch the live stream. Instead, I spent Saturday morning at the farmer's market, buying fresh bread and flowers for my kitchen table. I ran into my old co-worker Maria, who invited me to join her book club. I said yes without even asking what they were reading. That afternoon, I rearranged my living room, moving furniture around until it felt like a space designed for my comfort. Not just for hosting family dinners that had dwindled to holidays and birthday obligations. Sunday, I went to the movies by myself. I bought popcorn and candy and sat in the dark watching a romantic comedy that made me laugh out loud. When was the last time I laughed like that? Monday morning, I went back to work with a different energy. Instead of spending my lunch break running errands for Sophia or researching things she'd asked me to look up, I took a walk through the downtown park. I noticed things I'd driven past for years, a bronze statue of children playing, a coffee shop with hand-painted window signs, an old man feeding pigeons from a bench. I felt like someone who had been living in black and white suddenly seeing color. Sophia called a week later. I was in Phoenix, sitting on Carmen's patio with a glass of iced tea and a book I was actually enjoying. Mom, I've been trying to reach you. I've been traveling. Traveling? Where? Phoenix. I'm visiting your Aunt Carmen. Silence. In the background, I could hear television, the sound of domestic life continuing. How was the wedding? I asked because I was curious despite myself. It was fine. Small, Mateo's family handled everything. Fine. Not magical, not perfect, not the day of her dreams. Fine. I'm glad it worked out. Another silence. Mom, I think we should talk. When you get back. We're talking now. I mean really talk. How everything. I watched a hummingbird dart between Carmen's flowers, its wings moving so fast they were just a blur. What is it you want to say, Sophia? I want to say I'm sorry. I want to say I know I hurt you. And I know. It wasn't just about the wedding. I want to say I've been selfish and thoughtless and I took you for granted. These were words I'd dreamed of hearing, but now that they were coming through my phone, They felt almost anticlimactic. I appreciate that, I said. Do you think we can fix this? I think we can build something new, I said. But it's going to have to be different than what we had before. Different how? Equal. Like a relationship between two adults who care about each other, not one person constantly giving and another person constantly taking. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I admitted. But I think we can learn. I stayed in Phoenix for 2 weeks. Carmen and I hiked in the desert, visited art museums, cooked elaborate meals just because we wanted to. She told me about her divorce, her decision to go back to school at 50, the pottery classes that had become a passion. I told her about the years of sacrifice, the loneliness I'd been too busy to acknowledge, the fear of being unnecessary. You know what your problem was? She said one evening as we watched the sunset paint the sky in impossible shades of orange and pink. You thought love meant making yourself smaller so she could be bigger. Doesn't it? Sometimes. When they're children and they need you to be everything. But at some point, you have to teach them that love is also about seeing each other clearly, taking up space, being whole people who choose to be together. I don't know how to be whole, I said. Sure you do. You're doing it right now. When I came home, I found 3 letters from Sophia under my door. Real letters, written in her familiar handwriting on cream-colored paper. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the garden to read them. The first one was an apology pages of acknowledgement about the wedding. The years of taking me for granted. The way she'd treated me like a resource instead of a person. The second was harder to read. She wrote about growing up without a father, about the pressure she'd felt to make my sacrifices worthwhile, about her fear that she was a burden. She wrote about meeting Mateo's family and feeling ashamed of our small house, our second-hand furniture, the way I worked with my hands while his mother got manicures. I thought if I could marry into their world, I could pull us both up, she wrote. I thought I was protecting you from their judgment. I realized now I was just protecting myself from my own shame about where we come from. The third letter was an invitation. Not to a wedding, but to coffee. To a conversation. To the possibility of starting over. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she wrote, but I'm hoping you'll give me the chance to earn it. We met at the coffee shop downtown, the same one where she'd met Mateo. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table by the window, her hands wrapped around a mug like she was trying to warm herself. She looked older somehow, more serious. There were lines around her eyes I hadn't noticed before. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. We sat in awkward silence for a moment, both of us unsure how to begin. How's married life? I asked finally. She made a face not quite sad, but not happy either. It's an adjustment. Living with Mateo's family while we save for a house. It's not what I expected. His family? His parents have a guest house. They offered to let us stay there rent-free until we get on our feet. It seemed practical. I could imagine how that was going Sophia. Who'd never learned to ask before taking, living under the scrutiny of people who'd never wanted for anything. Are you happy? I asked. She considered this for a long time. I'm learning to be. We talked for 2 hours. Not about the wedding, not about money, not about anything she needed from me. We talked about her job, my trip to Phoenix, the book I was reading, her attempts to learn to cook. Normal conversation between 2 people who were trying to figure out how to know each other. When we were getting ready to leave, she reached across the table and took my hand. Mom, would you like to have dinner next week? Nothing fancy, just ... dinner. I could cook. Can you cook now? She laughed the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her in months. Barely, but I'm learning. I'd like that, I said. But I'll bring dessert. Just in case. It's been 6 months since the wedding that wasn't. Sophia and I have dinner every other week now. Sometimes at her place. Sometimes at mine. We're still figuring out this new relationship, how to be mother and daughter when the daughter doesn't need constant rescuing, and the mother has her own life to live. Some weeks are better than others. Sometimes she slips back into old patterns, asking for favors or advice in that tone that assumes I'll drop everything. Sometimes I have to remind myself that I'm allowed to say no, that love doesn't require self-erasure. But we're trying. She calls just to talk now, tells me about her day at work, asks about my book club and my garden, and the pottery class one started taking. She's learning to see me as Elena, not just as mom. I've learned things too. I've learned that I like hiking, that I'm good at growing vegetables, that I enjoy my own company. I've learned that I can be generous without being a martyr, loving without being consumed. Last month, Sophia brought me a small gift, a coffee mug painted with sunflowers, made in her pottery class. I wanted to replace the blue one, she said. Quietly, the one from when I was 12. I still have the blue mug. It sits on a shelf in my kitchen now, holding pencils and reading glasses, and the small everyday tools of my independent life. But I use the sunflower mug for my morning coffee, and every time I drink from it, I remember that love isn't about sacrifice, it's about choice. Every day we choose each other, not out of need or guilt or habit, but because we want to. Because we see each other clearly and decide that what we have is worth tending. Like a garden that requires patience and attention to bloom. Yesterday was my birthday. Sophia called me in the morning, not to ask for anything, just to say she loved me. She sent flowers to my office. Sunflowers like the ones on the mug. After work, I went home and cooked myself a nice dinner, then sat on my back porch with a glass of wine and a book. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, came over with a slice of cake, and we sat together as the sun set. Two women who'd learned that their lives could be full even when their children were grown and gone. You seem happy, Elena, she said. I looked around my garden at the roses I'd planted for a daughter who chose other flowers, at the vegetables I'd grown for myself, at the small perfect life I'd built from the ashes of who I used to be. I am happy, I said, and meant it completely. That's the thing about choosing yourself. I've learned. It doesn't happen once, in a moment of dramatic realization. It happens every day in small, quiet ways. In the decision to make a good breakfast instead of grabbing something quick. In saying yes to book club and hiking trips and pottery classes. In loving your daughter without losing yourself in the process. In learning, finally, that you don't have to disappear to be loved. The morning I chose myself wasn't the morning I got that email. It was this morning, and yesterday morning, and tomorrow morning too. It's every morning I wake up and remember that my life, this small, ordinary, precious life belongs to me. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.